Hello all, I'm Sai and in today's video I'm bringing to you my July reading wrap-up. July was an amazing reading month for me. I can easily say that it has been the best reading month so far for me in 2023. I did not recognize that while I was reading the books during the month, but only during the wrap-up I saw that all of the books that I've read have been really amazing except for like one or two max, and I managed reading a total of 20 books, which is like unbelievable for me myself. Okay, I did not know that I managed reading 20 books in July until I sat and wrote the script for this video. I managed reading a total of 13 physical books, 6 audiobooks and 1 ebook. So without any further ado, let's get into the books right away. Starting with the physical books as usual, the first book which I managed to finish reading in July is The Hidden Hindu, Book 1 by Akshat Gupta, which is the first book inside the Hidden Hindu trilogy. This was a very surprising read for me because I enjoyed this book throughout. It is very fast paced and there are also a lot of infodumps that the author does, but it is not made in such a way that it makes you feel bored at all. Here we follow our main character Prithvi from the future, who's trying to find this Aghori named Om Swami, who's contained within this very high-tech facility in some place inside India. I'm not going to say where. And the reason why Prithvi wants to find him is because Om Swami claims that he is an immortal and he has lived through the Ramayana and Mahabharata. Prithvi just wants to meet him and has some things that he has to do with him. The main thing that I liked about this book, despite the fact that it is repetitive at multiple instances, is that it includes India as a whole and does not limit the characters that the author draws from particular parts of the country. Usually what I see when it comes to Indian books is that there is not enough representation of South Indian characters in any story at all. But in this one, the author has not made that mistake. He has taken India as a whole and drawn out characters with different talents and abilities from different parts of the country, brought them together and shows us what kind of a melting pot our country is. I'm definitely going to continue on with this series and I rated this book 4 stars. The next one is a book that is related to the World War II and it is a Holocaust fiction or realistic story which is transformed into a fiction by the author, and it is The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris, which was my book club pick for July, and trust me, I just loved this book, okay? I cannot say that the experience of reading this book was enjoyable in any way, but it was very cathartic for some reason. I don't know why, okay? It was really well written and the story itself is super engaging. There are so many trigger warnings for this book. So if you're going to read it, please just go forward, read all the trigger warnings and then go forward and read the book, because it deals with so many heavy things that have happened in the World War II, especially inside the concentration camps, and not even one of the scenes is easy to read when it comes to certain brutal acts that were performed during that time. Despite all those things, the author draws in the love story of the two main characters, Lale and Gita in this one, and how she puts it forth in front of the story with the concentration camp as a background is just super amazing, okay? And I personally think that anything that happened in this book should not have happened in such a painful way. Reading it made me feel like it is humanly impossible to survive such situations and be able to say that story to someone. Definitely an amazing book, and I know that there are 2 other companions for this one, both of which also I'm going to read pretty soon. This is definitely a 5-star book and I personally think that many more people need to read this one. The next one is yet another historical book, but it is kind of a biography that is written by an author, and it is also the biography of an Indian queen, which is The Last Queen by Chithra Banerjee Diwakaruni, okay? I have heard amazing things about this author's writing before, but only after reading this book, I just felt how amazing it is. And if I'm not wrong, this is not even one of her most popular works. Even with that, I just loved this book so much. It basically tells us the story of the last queen of Punjab, Jindal Kaur, from her childhood until her death and what all has happened in the life of this amazing woman. More than anything else, the thing that I loved about this book the most is how much rooted it is to the Punjabi culture. I am not Punjabi myself, okay? I am a Tamilan, but after reading this book, I was just able to understand how rich a culture it is. I know that all the cultures in our country are super rich and have a very deep and wonderful history to them. And I was able to know the history of one of those cultures from reading this book, and it was just so amazing for me. And there were also multiple instances during which I could feel my blood boil, because even though we are all separated because of our languages and the different types of cultures that we follow throughout our country, while reading stories like this one, it just makes us understand how much our ancestors have been through in order to keep our culture intact inside the country despite the British invasions. This is definitely one book many more people need to read, and I'm so glad that I read it at last. And I'm also going to read more books by this author, and it was easily a 5-star read for me. The next one is a literary fiction book, and this is one book which I don't think is that great, at the same time not so bad either, and it is The Uncoupling by Meg Wolitzer. And I saw that the rating for this book was less than 3 stars on Goodreads, but I don't think it is that bad, okay? Basically, in this book, we follow this town in which there's this invisible spell that just gets cast out of nowhere, and that makes the women inside the town want to get away from their male counterparts and just not sleep with them. That's the basic plot of this book, and the way in which the author just introduces particular concept with all the couples or the women that we see inside this book is really, really well done. As a whole, I did not see what was the point of this book, but it was really a nice experience to read it, and there are also some social commentaries and some meandering that the author does using her writing style which were enjoyable to read. So I rated it 4 stars. The next one is an Indian mythological fiction book, and it is Ahalya by Payal Gotari, which is the first book inside the Sati series. And the best part about the series is that there are 5 novels inside the series. You can read all the 5 books in any order. They are just like companion novels one another. And in this one, we follow the story of Ahalya, whose life happens actually before the Ramayana when it comes to the Hindu mythology timeline. And we basically see how Ahalya was created and who's her parent, what her life was transformed into after many things that she goes through, and so many other such things. And the best part about this book for me was the writing of the author. It was not something that was easily understandable anyway, okay? It's a very short book. You can read it in like 2 or 3 hours max, even if you read it slowly. But there are multiple lines inside the book which I had to go back and read it again so that I can get the proper sense of what the author is trying to convey to me. Despite that, it was a really, really good start for an entire series. And I've also read the second book inside this one, which I'll be talking about shortly. And I rated this one 4 stars. The next one is a short story collection, and it is The Ghost of the Silent Hills by Anita Krishnan, which is a collection of 10 horror short stories, and I enjoyed this book so much, okay? I did not have that high expectations for this one, but after reading it, I'm sure that I'm going to recommend it multiple times in the channel here. And the best time, if you ask me, to read this book is now, because we are basically getting into the monsoon in India, and this book is definitely a monsoonal read because it has all the horror and creepy vibes that we need as Indians, because Western horror feels a bit different and Indian horror feels a bit different based on the movies that I watched so far. And I got the same kind of feeling, that is the Indian horror kind of feeling, after reading this one. And of all the 10 short stories that are written by the author here, 9 of them happen inside India and 1 alone happens in Australia. And for me, that alone did not sit well with this connection because it just felt a bit too disconnected. And I was reading this during my commute to and from work, and trust me, it is super fast paced that 1.5 hours of travel just went like this for me, and I was able to finish this book in just a single day. If you're someone who likes short story collection, you need to try this one, and I'd suggest you to read it during a cold season during the night time, because you'll just get all the vibes of this book perfectly during that time. I personally read it during the daytime, which made me miss all those feelings, but I think that you'll be able to experience that. But I think you'll be able to experience that perfectly if you read it during the night time. And I rated this one also 4 stars. The next book is the last one inside an epic adult fantasy series, and it is Renegades Magic by Robin Hobb, which is the last book inside the Soldier's Son trilogy. I have read all the 3 books in this series consecutively in the past 3 months, and I should say that of all the 3 books, this is my least favorite because it felt a lot more stretched out compared to the first 2 books. The first 2 books are also just as slow as this one, but they did not feel stretched out in any way at all for me. But this one felt so, because there are some things that the author kept on iterating despite the fact that she has written all of them in the first 2 books. And I personally think that it is not necessary to know the plot of this book at all. Even though it is very, very slow in its pacing, I should say that the entire plotting of the series is really, really well done by the author. The author actually addresses a lot of social things through her plot as well as her characters, and I think that's the main reason why people get very much connected and attached with Robin Hobb's books, despite the fact that they are very brutal in their tone and slow in their pace. And one thing that I'm sure is that she's really great in world building as well as character development more than any of the other things in her books. I don't like her prose also that much because it does not feel anything different from most authors that I've read. I know this main character to such an extent that if you give me a situation and ask me what this main character will do during that particular situation, I can easily answer what he'd do, because that's the extent to which the author provides us information about him and makes us understand him to a level. It is definitely a nice ending for the series despite the fact that it is unnecessarily stretched out, and I rated it 3.75 stars. The next book is another Indian mythology retelling, and it is Sita's Sister by Kavita Kane, which is the retelling of the Ramayana, but having Urmila as the main character here compared to Ram or Sita. And I just loved the way in which the author portrayed the story in a proper way to us without overshadowing Ram or Sita in this book, because we all know that they are the 2 main characters of the story and we cannot deviate from them if we want the story to be delivered properly to us. And the author does the exact same thing here. She does not belittle Ram or Sita in any way, but she makes us understand that this story's main character is Urmila, and she's the person whom we are going to be focusing on for most part of this book, despite the fact that we are going to follow the life story of Ram and Sita. She just shows us how much Urmila was necessary in order to keep the kingdom intact and together when all of the other things were going awry around her. For anyone who does not have that much knowledge about the Ramayana, Sita is actually Urmila's elder sister, but she is not her blood sister because she was adopted by her parents before Urmila was born, hence they have a 1-year age difference. Despite that, Sita is considered as the heir of the kingdom because it's the right thing to do. And Urmila also is not jealous of Sita in any way, she just respects and admires her as the elder sister that she has, and she just shows us how duty bound she is to all the main characters whom we see here, and the relationships that she has with Sita, Ram, Lakshman, her other 2 sisters, her mothers-in-law, and all the other such characters inside this book. She takes her stance and addresses what she wants to address in the proper way without disrespecting anyone. That is one thing which I just admired about the character of Urmila in this one and how the author had portrayed her. It is definitely one book which I was not expecting to like this much, and I rated it 4 stars again. The next one is a very short classic, and I bought this book also during the Prime Day book haul, and for some reason I forgot to show it to you guys, and it is The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde, which is a very tiny novella. Okay, it's not even 100 pages long, and you can read this easily within just 1 hour itself, and this just surprised me the hell out because I did not expect anything that the book gave me. I thought that it was a horror, but it is kind of a horror comedy more than anything, where we follow this family who goes and settles into this manor that has been haunted by this ghost for nearly 4 to 5 centuries now, and the ghost has always been very terrifying for each and every family who has resided there before this particular family, and it has also caused so many troubles and losses for the families who have lived there. But this family is a bit different because the way in which they react to the ghost is super comical in its tone. It was super comical in its tone, even though there is a sad backstory that is shown to us in the middle of the book. I'm definitely going to read more Oscar Wilde books after this one, and I rated this one 5 stars. Next we have a YA thriller, and it is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. And in this book we follow our main character Lydia, who in the beginning of the book is found dead inside a lake. And we just want to unravel the mystery behind her death, whether it's a murder or not, or if it's a suicide. And if it's a murder, who did it? And if it's a suicide, why she ended up killing herself. And in that process, we basically see the backstory of her family and herself throughout this book. Her family is comprised of herself, her mother, father, her younger brother, and her younger sister. And Lydia has kind of been the center of attention for all of these people inside the family throughout these years, because she's very smart and she's always been the top of her class throughout these years. And there are also multiple reasons why that has happened over and over again over the years, and how it has all affected her during this particular point, which may or may not have been responsible for her death. And there is one problem which I faced with this book. It is that it is a thriller, and I was able to predict most of the things that were going to happen in further chapters as I kept on reading the book. I'm not saying it is a completely bad thing, because I thought that since I'm able to predict these things, there will be something which will just come out of nowhere and just blow me away if I keep on reading the book. And sadly, nothing like that happened. Despite it, I'll not say that this is a bad book, because I was able to predict a lot of things, and that kept me flipping the pages and keep on reading the book, because I just wanted to know whether I was right or not. And I think many people will have the same kind of experience while reading this book. It is definitely very fast-paced and also a very quick read, so I rated it 4 stars again. The next book is probably the most popular of all the books inside this wrap-up, and it is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and it is also the latest of all the books that I've read so far this year, and I should say that this was such a fun ride for me, okay? Even though there are so many serious things that are happening inside the book, I basically think that the author has had a lot of fun while reading this book, and it just reflects to me also while I kept on reading it, because there are so many things. Almost each and everything that happens inside the book is very serious, but the tone in which the author delivers it to us is kind of satire, and it also makes us understand that this main character whom we follow here is definitely not a good person, and no one else who's connected with the story is also a good person in any way. It's like a combination of thriller, literary fiction, and satire put together, and personally I have not read anything like this before at all. There are also a couple of issues with this book, all of which I have planned to discuss with one of my friends here on BookTube, so probably you'll see the discussion pretty soon on the channel. But the whole experience of reading this book was weirdly fun in some way for me, even though there are so many horrible bad things that keep on happening inside the book, and I just loved the writing of the author more than anything in this one. I heard that continuously from various other people who have read her other books also before this one, and especially after reading this one, I want to see how she writes fantasy, because I don't think she can use the kind of prose that she uses here in fantasy, because it bring me away from the genre a little bit. Despite that, this was definitely a super fun ride for me, and it is one book which you cannot keep down if you start reading it, because it is very addictive in its tone. I rated this one 4.25 stars. The next book is a YA contemporary, and it is Pumpkin by Julie Murphy. Here we follow Waylon, who's in the last year of his high school, and he's also gay, who has come to the realization that he likes to play as a drag queen in certain pageants also, and this realization has hit him only now, even though he has been watching drag queen pageants for a few years right now. We basically just follow the final year of Valen in his high school with his twin sister Clementine, his family and his friends, and it's such a heartwarming book to read, okay? It just gave me the feel like Heartstopper, Sex Education, Modern Family and all such other shows out there. And it felt even more close to Heartstopper because it is YA in its category and it addresses a lot of very serious issues, but in a way that makes you feel so good after reading. You can finish this over a weekend, as I said before, because it's super short and it also moves really well. I enjoyed reading this so much and I just don't understand why it is not as popular as other such YA books out there. And I rated this one 4.5 stars. The last physical book is Kunti by Koral Dasgupta, which is the second book inside the Sati series. I read Ahalya during the first 1 or 2 weeks of the month and I read Kunti as the last book of July. It is very short and you'll probably have seen me reading this during my reading sprint, which I'm also planning to do more often in the channel. So if you did like the reading sprint, please do let me know down in the comments. This shows us the story of Kunti, but starting from her birth, how she was being adopted by another person who's not her birth parent, how she was married to this particular family and all the romantic feelings that she has had on this particular god. It is definitely an amazing book, and the way in which the author connects the stories of all these 5 women, either through some interludes or some kind of epilogues during the end of each and every one of these books, is a nice touch if you ask me. I like this one also and I rated it 4 stars again. Moving on to the audiobooks, the first one is My Gita by Devdutt Pattanaik, in which the author shows his version of the Bhagavad Gita to us. And only after reading this book, I got to know that there are more than just one Gita inside the Indian mythology. Since the Bhagavad Gita is super popular, I was thinking that it is the only form of Gita that is out there, but is it not so? And he also shows us how, even though it is very ancient in its textual form, how contemporary and modern it is when it comes to explaining life to us. This was definitely a great rendering of the author when it comes to the Bhagavad Gita and how he establishes it to us and shows us the chronological way in which the religion has developed, particularly in our country. It was definitely again an knowledgeable read for me because I've read a few of other books by Devdutt Pattanaik before and they have always been knowledgeable for me because he always has something new to bring onto the table and make me understand about my own religion. I'm not just reading it for the religion, but also so many of the philosophies and the concepts that the author brings forward and puts on the table so that we can understand how beautiful the practices in our country are and how we all practice them without having that deeper knowledge of them. It was definitely a good book and I rated it 4 stars. The next one is Prahlad by Kevin Missal, which is the third book inside the Narasimha trilogy or Mahavatar trilogy by the author. I read the first 2 books at the time they were released itself, Narasimha and Hiranyakashyap. I liked the first book, Narasimha, so much. And second book was a huge letdown for me because it did not feel like much happened inside the book at all. And this one was super action-packed. There are so many things, okay? This is actually the historical fiction part of the story compared to anything else if you ask me, because the story that I know of the Narasimha Avatar actually ends in the second book itself. And in this third book, the author has just gone by himself and just imagined a lot of things and presented them to us, showing us the Avatar in a totally different form. It was action-packed, really well written, super easy to read and also super fast-paced. I did not expect to like the ending of the series after having hated the second book, but this was definitely surprising for me and I rated it 4 stars again. The next book is Durga by Kevin Missal again, which is the first book inside the Devi duology. If I'm not wrong, this book got launched this year only, and if I'm correct, the second book will be released pretty shortly, okay? And this was kind of a letdown for me because there was nothing much happening in this book at all. It is basically just the fictional story of Durga and how she fought off and killed Mahishasura. It is basically the story of the Navaratri or the Dasara festival that we celebrate here. And I don't think that the author did a great job of presenting it to us here because it did not have that much substance to it and so many things just felt very rushed up and it felt like the author did not have enough space to tell the story that he wanted to tell. There was also not that much of a character development, especially for the main characters here. Hence it was not that great or satisfying for me, so I rated it 3 stars. The next one is a self-help book and it is The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. This is actually a book that shows us why many of us keep goals for ourselves, and once we attain that goal, we struggle to just go past that goal, even though it was very much possible for us to attain those goals by practicing all the things that we practice in the most diligent and proper forms. And the term that the author uses to refer to this problem is called the upper limit problem. And it was very fascinating for me because there are multiple instances in my life itself where I have set goals for myself, achieved them, and found it very difficult to get past those goals, even though I kept on trying hard just as I did before. And this just showed me how we are tuned in a mental or subconscious way by ourselves in order to not achieve those goals which we set for ourselves after we reach a certain point. And the author also talks about why many people face this midlife crisis during their 40s in their lives and how we can all avoid that just by practicing certain mental exercises and clearing certain mental blocks for ourselves. I took away a lot of stuff after reading this book and I'll also reread it again. So I rated it 4.25 stars. The next one is a non-fiction book again, and it is Queeristan by Parmesh Shahani, which talks about the inclusion of LGBTQ people inside the Indian workplace. And this was definitely a super knowledgeable read for me. And if you're also someone who works in the corporate industry, you need to read this book because it just shows us how much important it is in order to bring the LGBTQ people and recognize them inside the workplace and provide them with all the particular type of amenities that they need in the proper way. The author talks about so many stuff in here and it is very difficult to keep all of them in mind just after reading it once. So I'm definitely going to buy a physical copy of this book and read it like 2 or 3 more times because I'm sure that we can get a lot more after reading this book multiple times. He just gives us clear-cut fact and data and stats about the various things that the government as well as people inside the country are doing and have done in the past in order to make the life of the LGBTQ community more comfortable as well as more uncomfortable throughout the years, and the impact of the British invasion and how it changed the mentality of the Indian population despite the fact that queerness is very easily accepted and shown as a normal thing in the Indian culture even before anyone came and invaded us. He also talks about the various state laws and how we have made multiple amendments in order to safeguard the people and make people aware of all these things that are going on inside the society, and how this particular community needs even more support from all the other communities inside our society in order to make them as well as our country as a whole thrive. It was definitely a super informative and necessary book and I rated it 5 stars. The last audiobook is an adult contemporary romance and it is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I basically thought that this book was just going to be some adult romance that is very smutty in its tone, but I was very surprised because it had so much more going on to the story rather than just the romance itself. And the thing that I liked more about the story is that the author provided a lot of care for both the characters and how they need to be developed in order to make us feel like they are actual people inside the story and not just 2 people who want to bang each other. I'm not saying there is anything wrong with smutty or steamy romance books, but I want a bit more to the relationship because if it's just physical, it does not feel like a romance to me at all in most cases. And in this book, there was physical as well as emotional attraction for both these people and was really well done by the author. It is also a page turner again because you just want to know what is going to happen next because at multiple instances it is super cute and both the characters whom we follow are also very interesting people. They don't seem flat at all in any way, and I felt good while reading this book because in various other adult romances just like this one, I've seen that the male character is just shown like this cardboard cutout of a very hot man to whom the female main character is getting attracted completely, and it was not the case here. They are definitely very attractive people, but they have so much more going on in their lives compared to just their physicality. I think I'll be reading more books by this author, especially if it's romance, because I like this one very much. And I rated this one also 4 stars. Finally, talking about the one ebook which I read, and it is a comic book called The Ghost of Recuscu by Angelica Del Campo. It was a little bit long when it comes to a graphic novel format or comic book format, but I liked the story because it was very cozy in its tone. Here we follow 2 sisters and their father going to this coastal town for a vacation, and they are staying in the small house near a lighthouse which has been abandoned. And the woman who was actually handling the lighthouse was stuck in the storm and she was killed for some reason. And that woman is also very popular because she ended up saving the child of one of the most popular presidents of America like a couple of centuries back. The way in which the author blends in different elements of the story and brings them to us in a really nice and cozy way was very heartwarming to read at multiple instances. It also has some dark things going on, but the author just handles them in a really nice way. I like this one and I think I'll be recommending it more in the channel also. I rated it 4.5 stars. So yes guys, those are all the 20 books which I managed reading in July, and just as I said before, it was an amazing reading month. And I hope that the further months into the year are also going to be just as good because we don't have much time for the year to end. And I want to read even more amazing books and find some new favorites. Don't forget to tell me your July wrap up in the comments below because I'd like to know them. And if you did enjoy watching today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also share it to your friends. And if you want to get more content from me, do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.